Okay, so we've gotten a lot of questions about this one. You guys sent in this Better Up article, and
Yeah.
it seems to have really resonated. It's why do I feel empty inside? Reasons and tips to help.
Hmm.
And it was written by Grace Guruk Muhammad. She's a Better Up coach, therapist, and adjunct professor. What do we want to accomplish today?
Well, I think, like you said, it's really resonated with a lot of people, and it's something that I think we can all relate to at certain times in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
And the article really starts by saying, like, this feeling of emptiness can manifest so differently for everyone.
Right.
So we want to kind of like dig into that,
Yeah.
and explore like, where is it coming from for you? Maybe what are some of the root causes of that? And then the article gives some really tangible advice for, how to move forward, how to move towards a place of more fulfillment.
Yeah. And the article really starts off by saying that this feeling of emptiness is very subjective. For some people, it's like the article mentions, it's just going through the motions, being on autopilot. And then for others, it's like maybe a lack of excitement in previously enjoyed hobbies.
Yeah,
So there's a wide range of the way that emptiness can affect people.
absolutely.
And they really dig into 8 potential reasons why someone might be feeling this way. So let's unpack those.
Yep.
The first one, the disconnect from values.
This one is really interesting because I think it can creep up on us without us even realizing it.
Yeah.
So the article explains it as your daily life and the choices that you're making aren't really lining up with what you believe in
Exactly.
and what's important to you, your core values.
It's like your internal compass is misaligned
Yeah.
and you're heading in a direction that doesn't feel true.
And they give some really clear examples. You might have this nagging feeling that a career change is necessary, but you haven't done anything about it. Or like you're living in this fast-paced city environment, but you had this yearning to be out in nature and have a slower pace of life.
Right. It's like there's this dissonance.
Yeah. Between who you are at your core and what your life is actually looking like day to day.
It's almost like your inner self is screaming at you saying, I'm not meant for this.
Exactly. And that feeling of emptiness is kind of like the alarm bell.
Right.
It's telling you that something needs to shift.
Okay, so then moving on to number 2, which is insufficient sleep.
This one is something that I think we often underestimate.
Yeah.
How huge an impact sleep has on our overall well-being.
Yeah.
And the article really connects it directly to our mental well-being.
Right.
It's not just about feeling tired the next day. It's about our capacity for joy, our capacity to engage,
Right.
our capacity to, be present in the world.
Yeah.
And when we consistently don't get enough sleep, it disrupts this really fundamental process of rest and recovery that our bodies and minds need.
And the article even touches on how sleep disorders can complicate things
Right.
and make those feelings of emptiness even worse. So it's like it's not just a luxury, It's actually something that's vital to your well-being.
Absolutely. Sleep is a necessity.
Yeah.
It's not something we could just skimp on.
Yeah.
And I think if we connect it back to, the first point about values, if you're not getting enough sleep, how can you even begin to identify those values or have the energy to pursue a new hobby? Or
It's like a building block.
exactly, it's like the foundation
Okay.
of everything else.
Then we've got number 3, which is boredom and a lack of mental stimulation.
I think we've all felt that kind of like blah
Yeah.
feeling
Yeah.
where nothing seems to really capture your attention.
Like you're just going through the motions.
Right.
And what I think is insightful is the article really differentiates between boredom and a lack of stimulation.
Yeah.
Because boredom is this immediate feeling,
Like I'm bored right now.
Yeah.
There's nothing interesting.
But a lack of stimulation is more of an ongoing state
Right.
where you just don't feel challenged or inspired.
There's a lack of engagement
Yeah.
on a deeper level.
And I think even if you're busy,
Right.
if you're just going through the motions of your day and it's the same routine day after day, you can still feel uninspired.
Absolutely. You can be busy but not fulfilled.
Yeah.
And I think the article makes a really interesting point about how short bursts of boredom can actually be beneficial
Yeah.
because it gives us space to reflect and to kind of like recalibrate.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point because so often we're running around and we don't have time to just be
Right.
and sit with our thoughts.
It's like we're constantly trying to fill every void
Right.
with something external.
But the article does say that if it's prolonged boredom,
Yeah.
that can really drag you down.
Absolutely. It can lead to feelings of restlessness and just general dissatisfaction.
Yeah.
So I think it's really an invitation to ask yourself, like, where in my life am I feeling understimulated?
Right.
Even if it's not like acute boredom, Where is that lack of engagement?
Okay, then number 4, which is navigating significant life events.
This one is really about those big transitions in life that can just kind of like throw us for a loop.
The huge milestones.
Right.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is that even positive transitions
Yeah.
can trigger this feeling of emptiness.
Right, because the article mentions things like graduation, marriage, the birth of a child, all of
Yeah.
these things can bring uncertainty.
Right. Because they force us to confront who we are now.
Yeah, like what's my purpose now?
Exactly. And I think often, we have this idea of how these things are going to be.
Like we have expectations.
And then when reality doesn't quite match up,
Yeah.
we can start to feel a bit lost.
And the article even mentions these transitions can sometimes trigger an identity crisis.
Right, because it's like the old map of who you thought you were doesn't quite fit anymore.
Yeah.
And you need to redraw it.
So that can definitely lead to feeling unfulfilled and just emotionally disconnected.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to remember that this is all part of growth.
Yeah.
Change is uncomfortable,
Yeah.
but it's also necessary for us to evolve.
Okay. The number 5 is neglecting self-care.
This one is a big.
I think we're all guilty of this sometimes.
And I think it's important to understand that self-care doesn't have to be these big, elaborate things.
Yeah.
It's not all about spa days and vacations. It's really about any activity that you do intentionally to nurture your well-being.
Yeah.
And the article gives some great examples, like, it could be something as simple as enjoying your favorite dessert.
Right. Yeah.
Or taking a relaxing bath. Or it could be engaging in practices like meditation or going to therapy.
Yeah. Whatever refuels you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about finding those things that bring you joy and make you feel good.
Right.
And asking yourself, like, when was the last time I did something just for me?
Yeah.
If you can't remember, that might be a sign that you're neglecting your own needs.
Right. It should be a regular thing.
Absolutely. Self-care is not a luxury. It's a necessity.
Okay. Then number 6, dealing with unresolved emotions. This one is really deep.
Yeah, this one gets into some of the deeper stuff.
Yeah. So the article really digs into how past experiences, especially those that were difficult or traumatic, can actually stay with us
Right.
and shape how we feel and think in the present.
It's like those unprocessed emotions can kind of linger in the background
Yeah.
and influence our thoughts and behaviors without us even realizing it.
And then they can resurface later in life.
Yeah, maybe during transitions or times of stress.
Yeah.
It's like these old wounds that haven't fully healed,
Right.
and they can keep us from feeling whole and complete.
And they also talk about shadow work,
Yeah.
which is, can you explain that a little more?
Yeah. So shadow work is really about acknowledging and integrating those parts of ourselves that we might tend to hide or suppress.
Right.
It's like those aspects of our personality or our past that we're maybe a little bit ashamed of or afraid to look at.
Yeah, like our flaws.
Exactly.
Mm.
But shadow work is about bringing those things into the light with compassion and understanding.
Right.
Because the idea is that by acknowledging and accepting all parts of ourselves,
Yeah.
we can actually find greater healing and wholeness.
And the article makes a really important point here, which is that unresolved emotions can sometimes be a sign of a deeper mental health issue.
Mm-hmm.
So they really advise seeking professional help if you think that might be the case.
That's so important. If you're feeling stuck or overwhelmed, don't hesitate to reach out for support.
Right, because a therapist can really help you unpack those emotions.
Exactly.
Okay, then we've got number 7, which is grieving.
This one I think is pretty straightforward.
Yeah,
But it's important to remember that grief isn't just about the loss of a loved one.
right.
It can also be about the ending of a relationship or a job or any significant change that involves loss.
Right, any kind of loss.
And feeling empty is a very normal part of the grieving process.
Yeah.
Because you're essentially grieving the absence of something or someone that was important to you.
Yeah, it's like a void,
Right.
and it takes time to heal.
Absolutely.
And then finally, number 8 is feeling lonely.
This one is a big one these days.
Yeah.
And the article actually references a warning from the U.S. Surgeon General about a loneliness epidemic.
Right.
And it's pretty startling, the statistic that they share, that nearly 1 in 2 adults report feeling lonely.
That's crazy.
It's a huge problem.
Mm.
And, I think it speaks to our fundamental human need for connection.
Yeah,
When we don't have those strong, supportive relationships,
yeah.
we can feel very isolated and alone.
Right.
And that can lead to a very profound sense of emptiness.
Yeah, absolutely. So the article does a really great job of outlining all of these potential reasons why someone might be feeling empty. But then it goes on to this what to do section.
Right, because it's one thing to understand why you're feeling this way, but it's another thing to actually know what to do about it.
So let's dig into those.
Yeah.
The first strategy is to reconnect to your values and purpose.
And I think this goes back to that first point that we discussed.
Yeah.
About feeling misaligned.
Yeah.
And the article suggests a really simple exercise,
Yeah.
which is just making a list of 10 to 15 words that resonate with you.
Right. So things like authenticity, creativity, integrity, kindness, like what are your core values?
Exactly. And they even suggest looking at Brene Brown's list of values
Right. Okay.
as a kind of starting point.
Right.
But it's really about identifying those principles that guide you.
Yeah.
And then the next step is to ask yourself, like, how are these values showing up in my life?
Right.
Or are they not showing up?
Yeah. Are your actions reflecting them?
Exactly. And if not, what are some small changes that you can make to start living more in alignment with those values?
Yeah.
And I think it's important to remember that it doesn't have to be this big overnight transformation.
Right.
Just small, consistent steps can make a big difference over time.
Okay. So then the second strategy is to try a new hobby or explore a new interest.
This one is all about bringing some joy and excitement back into your life.
Yeah, I love this one.
Because I think hobbies can be such a great way to connect with ourselves
Mm.
and to tap into our passions.
Yeah, like you said earlier, reduce stress, increase happiness. And what I really appreciate is that they encourage you to explore things that you've always been curious about, or even just find new ways to enjoy hobbies that you already have.
Yeah.
And they also give the really good advice, like give yourself permission to make mistakes.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
Because so often I think we're afraid to try new things because we don't want to look silly
Yeah.
or we don't want to fail.
Right.
But actually, that's where the fun is.
Yeah.
It's in the exploration and the learning process.
Okay. Then the third strategy is to set new and exciting goals.
This one is about giving yourself something to strive for.
Right?
You know, creating a sense of purpose and direction.
Yeah.
And I think the key here is to focus on goals that are both exciting and attainable.
Right. Because if they're too big and overwhelming,
Right, then you're just setting yourself up for failure.
well, you're going to get discouraged.
So the article gives some great examples, like committing to a 30-minute walk a few times a week,
Okay.
or starting a simple monthly newsletter.
Right.
It's about finding those small, achievable goals that can build momentum.
Yeah. So start small, build on that.
Exactly. And they also talk about this technique called habit stacking,
Oh, yeah.
which is basically pairing a new habit with something that you already do consistently.
Right. Because then it just becomes part of your routine.
Right.
Okay. And then number 4 is nurture your relationships with loved ones.
And I think this goes back to that point about loneliness.
Yeah.
You know, we are social creatures,
Right.
and having strong, supportive relationships is so important for our well-being.
Right. We thrive on that.
And they give some really concrete suggestions, like attending local meetups, joining support groups,
Wow.
volunteering,
Yeah.
making time for phone calls with family members who live far away.
Right.
It's about being proactive and intentional about cultivating those connections.
Okay. Then number 5 might come as a surprise, but it's eat nutritious foods.
This one is all about nourishing your body from the inside out.
Right.
And the article actually shares a pretty startling statistic, which is that only about 10% of adults in the U.S. eat the recommended daily amount of vegetables.
Wow. That is low.
It's pretty crazy. And, you know, I think we often underestimate the connection between what we eat and how we feel mentally and emotionally.
Yeah.
But there's a huge link. You know, a diet that's high in processed foods can contribute to inflammation
Right.
and anxiety.
Yeah.
And then blood sugar imbalances can also really mess with our mood.
Yeah.
So they suggest focusing on incorporating protein, fiber, and healthy fats into your meals to help stabilize your energy levels and improve your mood.
Yeah.
And again, it's about making small, sustainable changes.
Right. Like swapping out sugary drinks for water
Exactly.
or adding more fruits and vegetables to your plate.
Little things can make a big difference over time.
Then number 6 is to get enough sleep, which we touched on earlier.
This one is so important, it's worth repeating.
Right.
Because sleep is really the foundation of our well-being.
Yeah.
It affects everything.
Yeah.
Our mood, our energy levels, our ability to focus, our ability to manage stress.
And they reiterate the recommendation of 7 to 9 hours of quality sleep per night
Mm-hmm.
for most adults.
And the quality of sleep is just as important as the quantity.
Right. It's not just about clocking in the hours.
Exactly.
It's about making sure you're actually getting restful sleep.
And they give some really helpful tips for improving your sleep hygiene.
Right, like creating a bedtime routine,
Mm-hmm.
avoiding caffeine in the afternoon and evening,
Right?
making sure your bedroom is dark and cool and clutter-free.
All those little things can make a big difference.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting that they mentioned a study that found that young women tend to report more difficulties with sleep.
Oh, wow.
So this is something that's particularly important for women to pay attention to.
Yeah, especially during those key years.
Absolutely.
Okay, then number 7 is exercise regularly.
This one is another one that has so many benefits for both our physical and mental health.
Right, because exercise lowers stress, it improves your emotional well-being, it helps you sleep better, it gives you more energy.
It's a natural mood booster.
Yeah.
And I think the key here is to find activities that you actually enjoy doing.
Right, it shouldn't feel like a chore.
Exactly.
So, they suggest things like dancing, swimming, yoga, finding movement that feels good for your body and that you can stick with.
Right. Make it sustainable.
And then lastly, number 8 is work with a coach or mental health professional.
And I think this is just acknowledging that sometimes we all, especially when we're dealing with something as complex as feeling empty. So a coach can be really helpful in terms of providing guidance and support as you're working towards your goals.
Right. And then a therapist can really help you with those deeper emotional issues and help you process any trauma or difficult experiences that you might be holding on to.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that there's no shame in seeking professional help.
Yeah.
It's actually a sign of strength and self-awareness.
Yeah, absolutely. So it sounds like the article from Better Up gives a lot of really great food for thought and really good strategies for dealing with this feeling of emptiness. But I think ultimately it comes down to this idea of reconnecting with yourself.
Right, yeah.
Figuring out what's truly important to you.
And then making changes to align your life with those values.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to be patient with yourself through that process.
Right.
Because it can take time.
Yeah, it's not going to happen overnight.
And it might feel uncomfortable at times.
Yeah.
But it's worth it.
So thinking about all of this, all of these potential reasons and all of these strategies, what's one small step that you can take today towards that reconnection?
Yeah. What feels most resonant for you right now?
And then also, the article mentions Better Up Digital.
Yeah.
Which is their free AI coaching platform.
I bet a good resource to check out.
Yeah, it offers some science-backed strategies for managing stress and improving your well-being. So that's another option if you're looking for support.
Absolutely.
Okay, so there you have it. Hopefully this deep dive has given you some new insights and some actionable steps to start feeling more fulfilled.
And remember, you're not alone in this.
Yeah.
So many people are struggling with these same feelings.
Absolutely.
And there is help available.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
We'll see you next time.
See ya.